Imagine a single tweet erasing 75 years of the world's most successful trade partnership in less than 24 hours. For 3 generations, the border between the United States and Canada has been more than a line on a map. It has been the busiest economic artery on the planet, pulsing with over $2 billion of goods every single day. But on Saturday, January 24th, 2026, that artery was threatened with a total blockage. From the gilded halls of Mar-a-Lago, a warning was issued that sent shockwaves through every boardroom from Toronto to New York. A 100% tariff on every single product crossing the border from Canada into the United States. This isn't just a political spat over electric vehicles or canola oil. This is the moment the empire economy faces its greatest rupture since the Great Depression. What do the insiders see that you don't? They see a world where your gasoline price doubles overnight, where your grocery bill becomes a luxury expense, and where the longest undefended border in the world becomes a front line of economic warfare. To understand the magnitude of this threat, you have to look past the headlines and into the high-stakes chess match being played by 2 men with radically different visions of the future. On one side, you have the American president, wielding the 100% tariff like a sledgehammer to prevent what he calls a Chinese backdoor into the American market. On the other, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, the man the president disparagingly refers to as governor, attempting a delicate pivot toward Beijing to save Canada's agricultural and energy sectors from total stagnation. But here is where it gets critical. On Monday, January 26th, Carney was forced to blink. In a series of urgent statements, the Canadian Prime Minister rejected the notion of a full free trade agreement with China, attempting to de-escalate a crisis that threatens to bankrupt the Canadian state. He is citing the non-market economy clause of the North American Trade Pact, desperately trying to prove to Washington that Canada is still a loyal partner. But is it too late? The logic of the 100% tariff is simple and devastating. If a Canadian company sells a component to an American manufacturer for $50, that component now costs $100. In a world of integrated supply chains, where a car engine might cross the border 7 times before it's finished, the compounding cost is exponential. Let me walk you through the data. Canada provides 60% of all crude oil imported by the United States. The refineries in the American Midwest are not just consumers. They are built specifically to process the heavy crude that flows south through the Enbridge pipelines. If that oil is taxed at 100%, the American energy grid doesn't just stumble, it collapses. We aren't talking about a 10-cent hike at the pump. We are talking about a $2 to $3 spike within 72 hours. This is the refinery trap that the mainstream media is ignoring. You cannot simply switch to Texan oil overnight. The hardware isn't designed for it. But the fracture goes deeper than oil. Look at the China pivot that sparked this firestorm. On January 16th, Carney visited Beijing and struck a deal to lower tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles, in exchange for China dropping its taxes on Canadian canola and lobster. To Carney, it was a survival move. To Washington, it was a betrayal. The president's Truth Social posts were clear. Canada was being warned that it cannot be a drop-off port for Chinese dominance. While Carney's Monday rejection of a full China deal was meant to calm the waters, it has instead revealed the structural trap Canada is in. If Canada aligns with the U.S., it loses its access to the world's largest growing market in Asia. If it aligns with China, it loses its only lifeline to the American consumer. According to documented economic models, a full-scale trade war with the U.S. would trigger a 4% drop in Canadian GDP and the loss of 700,000 jobs almost instantly. Let me walk you through a hypothetical scenario that is becoming more real by the hour. Imagine you are a contractor in Michigan. You depend on Canadian lumber for 30% of your materials. Overnight, the cost of every 2x4 doubles. The $30,000 renovation you quoted last week now costs $50,000. You lose the job, your supplier goes bust. The ripple effect continues until the entire housing market in the Great Lakes region freezes. This isn't just about Canada, it's about the systematic destruction of the American middle class's purchasing power through self-inflicted inflation. Economists at the Bank of Canada are already forecasting a deflationary shock, where interest rates might have to be slashed to prevent a total banking collapse, while the U.S. Federal Reserve might be forced to raise rates to fight the very inflation these tariffs create. It is a policy collision course with no survivors. Why is this happening now? Because the middle powers, as Carney calls them, are realizing that the old world order is dead. In his Davos speech just days ago, Carney warned that if you are not at the table, you are on the menu. He was talking about the rupture of the global system. The United States is moving toward a Fortress America model, while Canada is desperately trying to find a new patron in Beijing. The problem is that China doesn't want a partner. It wants a vassal. As the American president pointed out, China would eat Canada alive. The historical parallel here is the Smoot-Hawley tariff of 1930, which turned a market correction into a decade-long global depression by shutting down international trade. We are watching the 21st century version of that mistake unfold in real time. The consequences for you are not abstract. They are as real as your retirement account and your job security. If the Carney pivot fails to satisfy the White House, the next step is the militarization of the border and the end of the Five Eyes intelligence sharing. We are talking about a permanent shift in the security architecture of the Western world. When the U.S. Treasury Secretary plays down the threat of immediate tariffs, the markets might breathe for a second, but the Board of Peace invitation has already been withdrawn. Canada is being isolated, and an isolated Canada is a dangerous neighbor. The risk of a BRICS North scenario, where Canada eventually joins the non-dollar trading bloc to survive, is no longer a fringe theory. It is a documented contingency plan in Ottawa. So, how do you prepare for a world where the North American continent is at war with itself? First, you must eliminate all variable rate debt immediately. As trade wars escalate, the volatility in interest rates will become unmanageable for the average household. Second, secure your energy costs. If you have the ability to lock in long-term utility rates or invest in residential solar, the time is now before the Canadian energy flow becomes a geopolitical weapon. Third, diversify your physical assets. In every trade war in human history, hard assets like gold and silver have served as the only reliable hedge against currency debasement. Silver hitting record highs today is the market telling you that the paper system is cracking. Fourth, reassess your employment exposure. If you work in manufacturing, logistics, or any sector tied to cross-border trade, you need a secondary income stream that is geography neutral. The supply chains of 2026 are being redrawn, and many of the jobs in the Ontario-Michigan auto corridor will simply vanish in the restructuring. Fifth, maintain a 6 to 12-month cash reserve in a diversified basket of currencies or liquid assets. Do not keep all your eggs in one national basket. Finally, stay ahead of the narrative. The news you see on the surface is designed to keep you calm, but the data under the hood is screaming for attention. The 100% tariff threat is the ultimate empire economy warning. It tells us that the era of easy cooperation is over and the era of economic siege has begun. Whether Carney's Monday pivot is enough to satisfy the hunger for America first remains to be seen, but the damage to the foundation of trust is already permanent. The borders are closing, the tariffs are rising, and the world you knew is being dismantled tweet by tweet. Stay ahead of the curve as these patterns evolve, because in this new era of global rupture, the only person looking out for your financial survival is you. The insiders are already moving their money. The question is, are you?